Ever feel like you're running through life with a blindfold on?
Yeah.
Like trying to navigate all these obstacles and you can't even see where you're going.
I feel you.
Well, today we're ripping off that blindfold and getting some insider tips.
Oh, I like that.
We're diving into this textbook all about psychotherapy across the lifespan.
Okay.
It's really fascinating stuff. And, the goal here isn't just to understand the challenges each age group faces,
Right.
but why those challenges hit so hard.
Yeah, it's like getting a sneak peek behind the curtain,
Yeah,
to see how our minds work differently at different points in our lives.
exactly. And we're also looking at how societal expectations play a role.
Mm-hmm.
So to kick things off, let's talk about those brand new adults, the 18 to 25-year-olds.
Okay.
The ones who are legally adults,
Right.
but maybe still haven't quite figured out what that actually means.
The book calls them fledgling adults.
Fledgling adults. I like that.
It's a perfect description, right? Because they're testing their wings, trying to fly on their own.
Totally. And I remember feeling that pull so strongly,
Mm-hmm.
like wanting to be independent,
Mm-hmm.
but still needing my family's support. Like wanting to conquer the world,
Mm-hmm.
but still needing that occasional pep talk from mom and dad.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a classic experience for this age group.
Right.
And the book dives deep into why that is.
Okay, so tell me more.
Well, it argues that this whole boomerang generation thing, where young adults move back in with their parents,
Yeah.
it's not just about finances.
Yep.
It's about a deeper need for emotional support during a really intense time of identity formation.
So it's not just about needing someone to do their laundry.
It's more than that. It's about having that safety net while they're figuring out who they are and what they want out of life.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
At that age, you're starting to solidify your values, right? Putting all those idealistic notions from adolescence to the test in the real world.
Yeah, and sometimes the real world doesn't quite live up to those ideals.
It can be a harsh reality check.
It is. And on top of that, you've got the whole identity pressure cooker.
Oh, yeah.
Figuring out who you are, what you believe, in your place in the world.
And that includes things like sexual identity, which can be especially challenging in today's world.
Absolutely. There's so much to process at that age. And the book brings up this really interesting point about the dynamic between fledgling adults and their therapists.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, often the therapist is from an older generation, right?
Right.
And they might actually relate more to the fledgling adult's parents than to the fledgling adult themselves.
Whoa, that's a really interesting dynamic.
It is. It creates this potential for misunderstanding and tension within the therapeutic relationship.
It makes you wonder how much of our struggles are actually tied to our age.
Right.
And how much is just part of the human experience.
Exactly. That's a question that we'll keep exploring as we move into the next stage of adulthood.
All right, I'm hooked. Let's dive into that next stage.
Okay.
This should be interesting.
It is. Buckle up.
And
We're about to unpack young adulthood.
all right, bring it on. All right, so we're diving into young adulthood, that time between 25 and 40, when you're supposed to have it all figured out.
Yeah. The career, the relationship, the house with the white picket fence.
Is that what it's supposed to look like?
Well, the textbook kind of throws a wrench in that perfect picture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It suggests that even though young adulthood might seem calmer from the outside, there can be a lot of anxiety brewing under the surface.
Anxiety. I thought this was supposed to be like the prime of life. Everyone talks about how great your 20s and 30s are.
It can be a great time, but it also comes with a lot of pressure.
What kind of pressure?
Well, think about it. This is when a lot of us are really stepping into those traditional adult roles.
Right. Getting serious about our careers, maybe getting married, starting families.
Exactly. And with those roles comes a ton of pressure to succeed, to hit certain milestones.
It's like there's this invisible checklist. And if you're not checking off the boxes by a certain age, you're somehow failing at adulthood.
Totally. And it's easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others. Like, are we on the right track? Are we keeping up with everyone else?
Oof, comparison is the thief of joy, right?
It really is. And beyond those external pressures, the book also talks about some interesting internal shifts that happen during this stage.
Oh, like what?
Well, for one, our relationships with our families change. We're moving from a more dependent dynamic to a more equal one.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not relying on your parents as much anymore. You're more on your own 2 feet.
Right. But even though it's a healthy transition, it can bring up some unexpected feelings.
What do you mean?
The book actually uses the word grief.
Grief. Seriously. I always thought grief was about the death of a loved one, not about becoming an adult.
I know it sounds strange, but the book explains it really well. We can actually grieve the loss of our younger selves, The loss of that carefree freedom we had before all the adult responsibilities piled up.
So it's like you're mourning a past version of yourself.
Kind of. And we might also grieve the close-knit family bonds we had growing up, even if we're still close with our families. It's a subtle kind of grief, but it's real.
Wow. I never thought about it that way. But it makes sense. You're letting go of one chapter to start a new one.
Yeah.
And even if it's a positive change, there's still that sense of loss that comes with it.
Exactly. And this all ties into another idea the book brings up, the changing timetable of adulthood.
What does that mean?
Well, people are staying in school longer, delaying marriage and parenthood. Those traditional markers of adulthood aren't as clear-cut as they used to be.
So are we redefining what it means to be an adult?
In a way, I think we are. And this changing timetable can be a good thing. It gives people more freedom to create their own path.
Right.
But it can also lead to a lot of uncertainty and even a reluctance to take on full adult responsibility.
Because you're not sure if you're doing it right or on time.
Exactly. It's like, am I where I'm supposed to be at this age?
Yeah, I remember feeling that a lot in my late 20s and early 30s, like constantly questioning if I was on the right track.
It's a common feeling for this age group. And it brings us to another fascinating point the book makes about this stage of life.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. All right, so are you ready to talk about middle age?
Sick.
That time between 40 and 65 that everyone likes to joke about?
The midlife crisis year.
That's exactly. Where you're supposed to buy a sports car and suddenly question all your life choices.
Well, get ready to throw those stereotypes out the window.
Okay.
Because this book takes a completely different approach.
Oh, I'm listening.
It presents middle adulthood not as a crisis, but as a time of deep reflection and reevaluation.
Interesting. So less about freaking out and more about taking stock of where you're at.
Exactly. It's like you've reached this point where you have a wealth of life experience under your belt.
Right. You've had your successes, your failures, your heartbreaks. Hopefully you've learned a few things along the way.
And middle adulthood becomes this opportunity to really process all of that,
Yeah.
to figure out what truly matters for the next chapter.
So it's like a turning point, a chance to reassess and maybe make some changes.
Absolutely. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. The book acknowledges that there are real challenges that come with this stage, too.
Like what?
Well, for one, you're often juggling a lot of responsibilities.
Oh, yeah.
You might be at the peak of your career while also raising a family and maybe even taking care of aging parents.
The sandwich generation squeeze.
It's a lot to handle. And on top of that, the book points out that this is when we really start to confront our own mortality.
That got real.
It does. Our bodies are changing. We're dealing with things like menopause. And society constantly reminds us that we're not getting any younger.
Which can be tough. Our culture doesn't exactly celebrate aging. It's all about staying young and denying the natural progression of life.
It's true. But the book encourages us to reframe our thinking about aging, to appreciate the wisdom and resilience that often come with this stage.
Okay, I like that. So instead of dreading middle age, we should embrace it.
Embrace the wisdom, embrace the experience.
And maybe embrace a few wrinkles along the way.
Exactly. And here's a fact from the book that might surprise you.
Okay, hit me with it.
Self-esteem actually peaks at age 60.
Wow, I would not have guessed that.
It's true. And it really challenges that idea that middle age is all downhill.
It's like you finally reach this point where you're comfortable in your own skin. You know who you are, and you're not as swayed by what other people think.
You've earned your confidence, and that can be incredibly empowering.
So we've explored these 3 stages of adulthood, from fledgling to young to middle age. What are some of the big takeaways, the threads that connect it all?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that no matter our age, we're all dealing with some of the same universal human experiences.
Right.
Fear of loss, the desire for connection, figuring out our roles and responsibilities. These themes come up again and again throughout the lifespan.
Right, it's like we're all on the same journey, just at different points along the path.
Exactly. And I think recognizing that can help us be more compassionate and understanding toward ourselves and others.
And that's a great note to end on. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive through adulthood.
You're welcome.
It's been a fascinating conversation. And to our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you during this episode? What surprised you? And here's something to ponder. What unique challenges and triumphs await in the later chapters of life? Those 65 and older years that we didn't get to explore today. Thanks for joining us. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.